Coming up on this week's edition of our weekly podcast, Bankole's Nation, Councilwoman at Large Mary Waters on the present and future of Detroit, the question of homelessness, the issue of the next mayor of Detroit, the issue of the next city council, the I-375 project, rental ordinance, and much more, all coming up right after this break. Stay with us. And Bankole Thompson, Mary Waters, the highest vote getter in the recent Detroit primary election, is our guest. All right, for this week's edition of our weekly podcast, Bankole's Nation, our guest is Councilmember at Large Mary Waters, who is the highest vote getter in the recent Detroit 2025 primary election. Councilmember Waters, before she got into the Detroit City Council, was in the state legislature where she was the minority floor leader. And of course, Governor Gretchen Whitmer walked with her or walked in her caucus and so forth. Councilmember Waters, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
You know, I want to begin. There are a couple of issues I want to talk to you. I want to talk with you about, but let's begin with the town hall on Thursday, the Detroit Land Bank Authority town hall. I will be moderating it, and of course, been put together by Councilwoman Mary Waters, who has been very vocal on this issue. And I get a sense that this issue of the land bank, I call it a boondoggle, you know, and it's one of the most important, perhaps, it's one of the most important issues in the city right now. People get upset when you mention the land bank.
Yes, yeah, people do get upset because people, Detroiters in particular, have been just really, I mean, how can you say to Detroiters that you give them a home that is almost impossible to repair? You sell them this home for about $1,000 in most cases. And then you tell them that they only have a certain period of time, give them 6 months to complete the necessary repairs. And in addition to that, they also learn that there are additional needs for that particular house. Now they've really been set up. So they go ahead and they put all of their hard-earned money in this house, only for the land bank to come back after a few months and say, listen, you didn't meet the guidelines, you didn't meet the timetable, we're going to take this house back. But so now you've got that person extremely upset because, you know, it's not like they're wealthy. You know, these are hardworking people who are trying to make sure that they and their family have some decent place to live. Right. And so it is so frustrating. And they've done this to other people too, people who purchase buildings from them. They give them a time frame. I never forget, and my heart aches for this guy on the east side. I met him, Bankole, and he talked about how he had put over $20,000 in this place. And one day the land bank came and just cut the wires from his fence around his building and took his property. The other thing that the land bank does is they take private property too. It's called, and they do it through our nuisance abatement program. I've asked Attorney General Dana Nessel for an opinion because I don't believe that this city council ever should have given the land bank the authority to go in and take private property. This is not property that the land bank owns. I mean, it is enough that the city, in fact, gave all of our properties, city-owned properties, to the land bank. They gave it to them. Land bank owns all of this property, and when they make profits, none of that comes back to the city. And yet, we have given them over $100 million throughout the years, in 10 years. And what happens? We have been paying them subsidies, and I can't understand why. which is why they continue to create
Right.
all of these various programs that they want the city to sponsor. So this last budget cycle, I made a motion basically and said, listen, no subsidies for the land bank. So we removed the subsidies. I'm pretty sure they're going to bring it back next budget cycle. But I've got to tell you, I would fight my colleagues tooth and nails
Right.
on that because we should not be giving out any monies like that.
Well, and then the other thing too, Councilwoman Waters, is that even their annual auditing is questionable. I've written columns about it in my Detroit News columns about just how they don't know how to reconcile their books. That's it raises a question whether the land bank engages in hanky-panky business, question mark. And so you got all of those problems beseeching or all of those problems impacting the land bank. When you can't reconcile your books, you can't talk about how many folks you've paid, who's on the payroll, who's not on the payroll, who's on a contract, and all of that mess.
I know, and selling all of these properties in bundles. Thank goodness my staff went out and did some door knocking for the 42 homes that they were bringing to city council in a bundle. And so staff was like, well, I wonder if any of those properties are occupied. So I said
Wow.
to them, okay. I said, well, go out there and see. So they went there, got the addresses, knocked every single door. As it turns out, Bankole, 28 of those homes were occupied. And then now you had families who had not been told by the land bank, by the way, that their properties were being sold right from under them. And you had adult men literally crying because they said, now my family and my children, we're not going to have any place to live. And
Wow.
so, and the land bank's board is comprised of majority folks that do not live in this city. That's one of the things that I want to change in the memorandum of understanding, and that is require all of them to live in the city. If they don't live in the city, why would they be sensitive to our residents? They would
Well,
not be.
Councilwoman, you know this as a student of history. Malcolm X said that land is the basis of all power. When you
Yeah,
have property, when you have land, is power. So that attracts powerful rich people, powerful white folks, because they know the value of land and property. And I think it underscores what the land bank is going through. I want to let our viewers know and our listeners, Councilwoman Waters and I are going to be at the Wayne County Community College District on Wednesday, August the 20th, for this town hall at 4 p.m. Wayne County Community College District, of course, the downtown campus. You want to be there because it's important. Malcolm X said, land is the basis of all power. And believe me, if there's no property, there are no rights. And I think it's important to have this conversation, Councilwoman, especially as we begin to figure out the next chapter of what the next Detroit will look like.
it is. And just one more thing on that.
Sure.
Right now, Bakeley, they have about 700 properties that are occupied by Detroiters. Now, how many of those Detroiters are going to end up getting thrown out of those properties? I do not know. That's number one. Number two, they say they have 1,400 properties right now that are habitable. I want all of those properties, the 700 and the 1,400, returned to the city, allow us to work with philanthropy and so forth to try and um, renovate those homes so that
Right.
we can be sure that Detroiters take ownership of those homes. We have, our homeless population is growing. It's really escalating these days. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that we increase home ownership. People want a place where their children will have a backyard, place to grow up, and that's why we're asking for those homes. I'm pushing for us to take back those homes, the 700 that are occupied and the 1,400 that are out there that we can renovate and make sure that Detroiters own those homes.
You're hitting at something that is at the core of the stabilization of the Black family, which is property, land. Another issue that is at the core of that is crime, public safety.
Mhm.
And I've shared this with people, and I'm not saying this because I have you on the program this week,
Yeah.
but it's as if you're the only member of the city council. It's as if there is only one Detroit City Council member, and that's you, because with all the crime taking place, I've not seen any other council folk out here talking about what needs to be done. Let's go right into it. I want to begin with the senior citizens, though, which was kind of shocking and surprising for a lot of people. We hear gunshots, babies getting shot, folks found in an abandoned building, carjacking here. But now this crime pandemic has entered the territory of seniors.
Yeah, well, yes, it has. And I think that it has been there all along. In fact, silent bullying, those kinds of things that happen in a number of these senior citizen buildings. They talk about, sometimes when I go into the buildings, they talk about how they feel as though drugs are coming into the buildings, how people are allowing their their grandchildren in there, bringing drugs and so forth. So many of our seniors are already feeling very, very stressed. They are feeling bullied, and intimidation in their buildings. And what happened at this building down on East Jefferson, uh, they were playing music. The guy said that he didn't want the loud music. So then why didn't he go to security and say, could you please, for whatever reason, ask that they turn the music down? Because certainly they would have done that had security asked. But he demanded that they do it, allegedly, and came back out firing his weapon because they did not. So and so it wasn't so much about a lover's quarrel, because we cannot downplay what happened. I mean, this was really what they call a mass shooting. When you have that many people that were shot,
right,
it was a mass shooting.
right.
So we can't say, well, it was about a lover's quarrel. Maybe so, but it was still a mass shooting. And so we have to treat it as such. And we're going in there on Wednesday afternoon around noonish. And we're going to do a listening session, because oftentimes, I know it all too well because I work very closely with senior citizens. Some of them don't want to complain. Some of them are afraid to share their feelings. They are, but they are living there in fear and in stress. And we know that those things kill. Before you know it, they're dying before their time, simply because they're so stressed,
Right.
and afraid of the backlash that could come either from residents in the building and or from management as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't share their feelings. And management's job is to continue to get the rent, collect the rent. So they're not as concerned
About
as
the
we are.
well-being.
Yeah, we are concerned about it. So I want to hear from them. We're inviting the public health department to come in, our health department. We're inviting in the police department, because I know that there's some trauma, and we're hoping and we're asking that they share those fears with us. And then we want to make sure that they have access to counseling. We need to do those things. And I've been summoned to another building. They have some concerns, but when they call us, we go. And sometimes, Bankole, I've got to tell you, we fight and we push. We write letters, especially to those HUD subsidized buildings, because
Right.
we want HUD to do their part as well, making
Well,
sure that people are safe.
Well, I think it's commendable, and I'll say this without equivocation. It's commendable what you're doing. It looks as if you're the only councilman walking during the summer. Because nobody out there talking publicly and offering public leadership on these issues. Let's take this into the bigger issue of crime as well. Your take, because you talk to folk who are in law enforcement, and some folks say, well, crime is down and so forth. And it makes you wonder, though, if it's really down. I mean, why are we having all this rampant violent crime all over the place, people getting shot?
Frankly, I'm not sure where all of those numbers are coming from, showing decreases in crime. For me, and I'm trying to compare mentally what happened in 2024, 2023 as it compares to this year. And it just seems to me that it's escalated a lot more. Although they still say that crime was down in 2024 in comparison to this year. I just don't see it, and maybe it's being publicized a lot more or something. I'm not sure uh, why the numbers don't reflect that.
Right.
But I will say this: until we address the root causes of crime, poverty, joblessness,
Yeah.
broken families, because that's what we have to train these young mothers how to be parents. We need to do that. When a child is born, we actually need organizations that can say, come to this training, invite free training for these young mothers so that their kids are properly, so that they'll know how to properly train their children. Everybody don't know how to train a child. I never had any children myself. I got to tell you, it is not easy. It is not easy. It is something that we probably all should have learned from our parents, from our grandparents, but that is not the case, not these days.
So,
And so we have to address those issues, the root causes first and foremost. And we've tried to do that. At least I have, just trying to help people get jobs, to become gainfully employed. We have to do that as well. And until we do that, because you see, I believe that if people have a good paying job, people have a decent place to live. Now that in itself is going to help to drive down crime, because people care about where they live, especially if they're homeowners. Especially that in itself helps. It instills a certain amount of pride. Home ownership does.
Right. No, and Dr. King talked about that. People having a meal 3 days, and of course having roof over their head, and
Yeah.
those things go a long way. I'm just curious from you. Do you feel that the police department is doing all it can under Police Chief Todd Bettison, or do you want to see more from the police department when it relates to violent crime and where we are?
Well, the first thing I want the police department to understand is that, um, you know, stats, I mean, numbers don't make people feel safe. It just doesn't.
Right.
People still have bars on their windows, on their doors. They still don't feel safe. So we can tout these numbers as much as we want to, and it doesn't mean that much to your average citizen who's still living in fear. It doesn't. Um, I believe that we've got to turn it up in our neighborhoods. I believe, and I know that we have the CVI, Community Violence Intervention Groups. Okay, so I'm not trying to stop our community people from being engaged, helping us to solve crime. All right, that's fine. But I do want to see more police presence in our neighborhoods. I want to see foot patrols. That's what I want to see. And I do encourage the next administration to consider that people need to see a police presence in their neighborhoods. And I do believe that that will help to deter crime. Um, and and the curfew piece, when we talked about keeping some of the young people off the streets, well, you see what happened. A 14-year-old was carjacked at what was about 2 a.m., 4 a.m., or whatever it was.
Yeah, I just read
And
that. I just read that. Yeah.
killed. So, not sure why this 14-year-old was out of the house at that time. Parents probably don't even know that he managed to sneak out of the house, because that's what these teenagers will do. They will sneak out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to mislead people. Even when they brought it before the city council, they argued that it will help to save lives. And I do want to help save lives. So if it means that it will make parents pay closer attention and make sure that their child is not sneaking out of the house, that their child is home by a certain time, then yes, that will help to save some lives. But I also don't want to mislead the community to say it's going to really help to solve our violent crimes, because
Right.
some of those drive-bys that happen, uh, those drive-bys where they drive by, shoot up houses and so forth. A lot of times that's done in midday.
Yeah, in broad daylight. That's what I was.
Broad daylight.
That's what I was going to say, because I think the downside to the curfew, in as much as it may have the best of intentions, police. The downside to that is, are we creating a law enforcement dragnet where people feel like, we get police all over. It's almost as if, and this may be a stretch to bring this in, but almost as if, is this a KGB style of policing we're encouraging in the community here, where people feel like there's this dragnet, and kids cannot be themselves. I mean, we've talked about studies have shown how sometimes Black boys, young Black kids, are not allowed to grow up as kids. They're treated as adults and so forth, while their white counterparts, young white kids, are treated as kids, and they're allowed to grow up as kids. So they have their childhood. But Black kids sometimes don't have their childhood because they have all of these impediments.
The impediments and the stress too of trying to help make sure they help their families, they assist their families. Sometimes families are in need, somebody working to help make ends meet. A lot of young Black children take on the stress of their families. I've got to be out. I've got to get this job so that I can help my mom out, And so I know what a lot of them are dealing with. And so then what do? They go out and carjack. They go out and try to commit robberies. I'm not saying that some of these children go out and commit crimes and they don't have to because their parents are taking really good care of them. But you have too many of them who feel as though they need to help mama out. These single family households, especially when it comes to single mothers in particular, who have a very, very tough time. And some people say, well, that's no excuse, but when there's poverty and people are trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, sometimes that mom too often turn the other way and their child goes out and commit a crime. But then you have some strong mothers too that are single, extremely strong, and they will get with these kids when they break the rules and they break the law. But we have so many of them, Bankole, that are not. And that's why it's so important that we have the ability to help them to get job training.
Right.
And so that they can become gainfully employed.
Right.
I've got to tell you, the Jumpstart program, which really I was the architect of, I invited one of my colleagues to participate in that. So it was co-sponsored by another colleague and I won't even mention the name right now, but it was. But so we did that because we at first was trying to get income supplements. All right. To give people, single moms, income supplement in particular for at least up to a year, at least.
Right.
Wasn't able to do that. So, but I was able to get the mayor to say, to agree to the Jumpstart program where we pay people to go back to school to get some additional trainings or to get to complete a degree or whatever it might be for up to 18 months. And so many people took advantage of that program. I kid you not, we've had over 1,000 people to graduate from the program. They've gotten jobs, gainfully employed, some of them up to $30 an hour jobs. And I went to that graduation, which was held at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church over there. And there were so many adults walking around in their caps, graduation caps. They were so excited. They literally got jobs. And so we have about another 700 people that are left in the program. Now we're out of funding because why? We don't have the Biden-Harris team there to give us more opera dollars. Those opera dollars did go a long ways. A lot of it helped to get people trainings and um, other kinds of things
Right.
that we use the opera dollars
So,
for.
so you're basically giving these people a second lease on life.
That is correct. We need to find additional dollars to
Right.
continue that very, very important program. People
And
are
since
asking
we got,
about
and
that
this
program.
this is my commentary and editorial, since we have foundations here, left, right, and center, and they'll write a check for anybody, that they like, who sneezes, who, and I mean, they could. This is the kind of thing that foundations should write checks to, and because you're giving people a lease on life and giving them a second opportunity to reinvent themselves. I remember back in 2008 during the crash on Wall Street, when the auto industry went under, I think Ford Motor Company had a similar thing where some of their workers were being retrained to enter new industry. In 2014, I'm sure you know, there's the Job Corps program, which came out of the U.S. Department of Labor, one of the achievements of the civil rights movement. Job Corps program, the Detroit Job Corps program in Highland Park. I remember in 2014, I was a graduation speaker for them, and I saw a lot of young people, Councilwoman, who were written up. And these are kids, quote unquote, at risk kids, came back, studied computer science. They were, vocational training. And now in spaces where they're making a lot of money, they've been given an opportunity in life.
Absolutely, Bankole. This is why I started an apprenticeship program here this last budget cycle. I put money in the budget for an apprenticeship program because we want to be able to offer those opportunities right here. I also chair the Skilled Trades Task Force. A lot of times, young people come to those skilled trade task force meetings, and they get hired the next day. They're able to go to paid training.
That's right.
That's why I encourage it. Sometimes now when I'm out in the community, I just ran into a couple of young people recently. I was at community meetings, community events, and I said, we do our next trade task force meeting in September, the third Wednesday in September. We normally do it the third Wednesday of every month, but we break in July and August. September starts again. And we want people to participate because I said to a young man, I saw him at a community event. I said, "Are you interested in skilled trade?" He said, "Well, I was considering, HVAC." I said, "Well, listen, consider it no more. I want you to come." His dad happened to be sitting right there, who's also a business owner. And I said, "Dad, you come and you bring him." I said, "He's talking about he was considering it. He doesn't have to consider it anymore."
Right.
I want him to come out to this task force meeting and let me connect him to all of those union leaders that participate in recruitment
Right.
so that he can get the necessary training and start making this money. Paid training.
Yeah, you
So
can be,
we're opening those doors.
you can beat that.
I, what I realized a long time ago, even when I was in the state legislature, that's why I worked so hard to help so many people become gainfully employed when I was there. That's why I was so grateful to Jennifer Granholm, who and I was the first elected official to endorse her in her campaign. But also, it gave me access to her team. I could refer people for jobs. I didn't demand that they hire them, but I could refer so many people for jobs who ordinarily would not have had
Right.
access. It is about access and it's about economics. So I realized that even then, and I worked very hard to make sure that people had access. They had an opportunity to go for that job interview. So a lot of people were able to get jobs, judicial appointments, so that because oftentimes when people get elected, you don't have the access to them. I cannot say
Well,
the same thing. I cannot say the same thing about Gretchen. I supported her in both of her reelection campaigns. But guess what? I didn't have the access.
yeah.
I could call her office and get treated like Joe Blow off the streets. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's how it was treated. So I couldn't refer anybody. I couldn't refer anybody to help them to become gainfully employed.
I can
Nothing.
Councilwoman, I get your drift on Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I think she did that to a lot of people who have been profoundly disappointed. I don't think this Governor Gretchen Whitmer is somebody who is loyal. She doesn't understand political loyalty is what works for her any day and so forth. And when she was running for election in 2018, she was desperate. She was looking for your support. She came to the town hall meeting on poverty that I hosted at Martin Luther King High School. You were there, and she promised all kinds of stuff. Talked about how she's gonna do this, gonna right to literacy, and decided to renege, try to go into Highland Benton Harbor to shut down the only high school. And I can show you on my phone her text message to me at 6 a.m. in 2019. 6 a.m. she sent me a text message. Woe is me, you're unfair to me, this and that. I'm doing the best I can. I said, well, you're going to pull out of Benton Harbor. You will pull out of Benton Harbor. And so she's done a lot of stuff. But, I feel like Governor Gretchen Whitmer is like a chameleon. She can be red in the morning, green in the afternoon, and yellow in the evening. That's my opinion, Councilwoman. But we can do an entire segment on Governor Whitmer. But I know you all go way back, but I think I also do know that woman. I know her very well, and she knows I know her very well.
Yes, you do. You did work very, very closely with her. You did, and but I guess I expected the same type of at least access that I had with the Jennifer Granholm.
Right.
I expected that, and it did not happen.
Well, let me say this, and I'm glad you brought up Jennifer Granholm. Jennifer Granholm had a thick skin. She was very politically mature. Mm-hmm. I remember the many times I would criticize her. She never took it personal, and not that I cared to go, but this every year the governor's mansion have what you call a media reception during Christmas, right? Granholm would invite me, even though I was very critical of Granholm. She would invite me to that reception. And of course, myself and other media stakeholders will attend, right?
Right.
Rick Snyder, I went, even though I was highly critical of Rick Snyder. But Gretchen Whitmer her office has never invited me throughout the entire 8 term. Not that I cared, but Granholm was so open. I was so critical that even before she got appointed by the Biden administration, she and I used to exchange text messages on Twitter privately. You know what I mean? I'll reach out to her about something. She'll respond right back. So to your point about Granholm, she was more politically mature than Gretchen Whitmer.
Yes, I would agree. Absolutely. But
so
those are the kinds of things that one remembers.
Right, no doubt. And I think you are in the business where you have to have a thick skin. There's certain things that you can't take personal. And I think our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, has disappointed a lot of people. And we find common ground in that. But I want to move this conversation forward though, to the next city council, the next mayor. But let me get your take about just your what are your expectations on the mayor's race here between Mary Sheffield, the president of the city council, and Reverend Solomon Kinloch, the senior pastor of Triumph Church. Just share your perspective in terms of what you would like to see both candidates speak about and speak on.
Well, first of all, I want people to keep it real. Let's be genuine. Let's not talk about pie in the sky, because you cannot deliver pie in the sky. Let's be real. Keep it real about what we're faced with potentially. We're going to have some real issues that we're faced with. Talk about the single moms and how we're going to help them to become gainfully employed. How we're going to ensure that that they have a decent place to live to raise their children. Talk about the working relationship that we need to establish with our public school systems, so we can have partnership, not to take over now, because being mayor of the city is a huge job within itself, but those partnerships so that we can make sure that our children have a place to live and that they have decent food to eat. These kids that live here in this city, we've got to make sure that we have that partnership with DPCSD, with Detroit Public Schools, so that so that the schools can say to us, this family needs help. This family needs to live in a better home. You know, I'm talking about real partnerships. And then that way that will help to improve our school system, because when children have a decent place to learn, they perform better. I believe that happens. Other things, what are we going to do about our crime in the city? You know, we can talk about what those numbers show. That's not reality, though. It really isn't. Um, Talk to our state legislators right now. Somebody should be talking to them, addressing the Public Safety Trust Fund. It's being held up for political reasons right now. I want the next mayor of this city to weigh in right now. Tell the Michigan State Senate, because it passed out of the House. Tell the Michigan State Senate that we need our money now, that you can't be playing politics with safety. We need that money here in this city right now. It just doesn't affect our community, but it certainly affects other communities across this state that have crime issues. Do that. And I think they should weigh in as soon as possible on that. So if we're able to address jobs, we've got to find a way to create jobs. We want to build in our neighborhoods, block by block. Let's include our block clubs in those initiatives. I've talked about that for a very long time, even when I was a state representative, how I want to see the community participate, whether or not we're getting a grocery store there, whether or not we're getting new homes there. Allow them to be a part of it. Don't shut them out. I hate it when development comes to the table, and the community has not had an opportunity to participate in the development. I want them in on the planning side of it. That's why some years ago when I was a state rep, I said, can you not go to the community and allow them to help you draft that plan? That's what I want to see.
Right.
And then you have a happy community. Now you have a community that's willing to do the work. Let's invest in our block clubs, because when we started defunding our block clubs some years ago, you saw where our community was not as clean. Crime escalated in our neighborhoods as well. Let's fund our block clubs. They are the key to making sure that we have clean and safe neighborhoods.
And that should be a no-brainer. As you were speaking, Councilwoman, I'm thinking also about even the I-375 project, and the importance of that, and importance of community input when it comes to Black bottom and all of that stuff. And I think sometimes people feel that some folks think that when we say community input, we're saying, well, we want to be the ones to control. But of course, it's going to impact people's lives. You might as well allow those whose lives will be most impacted to weigh in and tell you how they feel about issues that decide their destiny.
And let me tell you, don't bring that 375 project to me unless it includes Black people, because they were displaced. And I know that we can find some descendants of that community as well who were there at that time. That is true. But
like the survivors of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Go ahead.
That's right. We have got to do that. It is extremely important that we do that. We find that, and we got to make sure Black business owners are there. We have to, if there's going to be any homes there. I don't know what the plans are just yet. Right now, MDOT is still holding it up. I initially told Governor Whitmer that I wanted to be a part of that, some sort of committee that they were putting together.
Right.
I completed all the necessary paperwork as a council member. I did, because I nothing. I complete the paperwork, nothing. I haven't heard another single word.
That's the disrespect from the governor's office. But go ahead. We're listening.
Yeah. So it has been put on hold, whatever it is. And my thing is, if they can't do right by Detroiters with that project, then the federal government needs to weigh in. I'll leave it at that.
Well, it's
Because that's
interesting.
where the initial $100 million came from.
Right. No, I think it's important because that I-375 project, if done right, can speak to restorative justice, and it can speak to reparatory justice, and it can speak to the essence to address Black lamentations, and but again, it's all about who's in the room, Councilwoman. Sometimes I
Well,
feel
I
like
like
we
what
have.
you just said.
Sometimes I feel like we have the wrong negotiators in the room.
Yeah, I do like those three things that you just named, though, Bankole. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Okay, just
I mean,
copyright
because you
copyright
know,
Bankole Thompson. You can give me my credit, Councilwoman. That's not a problem. But so I know, and I want to ask you this: if how are you preparing for the next mayor come January? It's either going to be Mary Sheffield or Solomon Kinloch. Either of these two will be elected mayor in November. As a councilwoman, your priorities in terms of getting them lined up. How are you preparing for the new administrator, the new mayor? Because of course they'll be reaching out to you. Not only do they want your vote, but you do have a wider community voice, and they want to be they'll want to make sure that they're in line with some of your vision.
well, I'm not so sure if they will want to or not, frankly. But sometimes arrogance takes over. But
Yes, that's
but
true.
yeah, but let me say
But you
this.
can always come on this platform and let us know how you really feel if they're not
Oh,
listening. Go
oh,
ahead.
oh, and trust and believe I will.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. I do look to have a um a working relationship with whoever it is, respectfully. And respect works both ways. I don't report to the executive branch. They don't report to the legislative branch. And people need to understand that, because I don't mind. And if I run into a situation where mutual respect is not shown, or you're trying to penalize me because I took a different position, oh, that's going to be a problem. It will be a major problem. So, in order to, you have to earn respect. You cannot demand it. Uh, you just cannot. And so, um, I'm not going to be intimidated. If there's any bullying when it comes to those kinds of things, I will not be intimidated. I've managed to work well with this administration because they understand, with this particular one, they understand that my first priority are the people in this city. And it is. And I've been able to get some great things done on behalf of this city. Sometimes I was able to vote for certain things, and other times I was not. But I always managed to leverage my vote. Okay, you're asking me for this. All right, I want this program for seniors. I want this for young people. That's where I started the Next Up 313 program, Young Entrepreneurs Program. So there are different things. You can't just say, oh, yes, I'm going to give you what you want, and not say, I need something for the community.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. And so I'm looking for a mayor that's going to be open to those kinds of things. But I want a mayor that's sensitive to the community. Don't be a chameleon. Do not be a chameleon. And people think they're getting one thing and they end up getting something else.
Yeah.
Look at the person's track record. People, go back, take a look. Take a look. You need to know, Detroit, this is a very, very serious thing that you're about to do right now, electing your next mayor. Look into a person's heart. Because, as Black people, we have the ability to do that. We can look into a person's eyes and into their heart. We have a way of doing that. Black people, we do. Do that. I'm counting on them to do that.
So let me ask you, and I'm glad you mentioned the role and the responsibility of the mayor vis-a-vis the city council, because I think sometimes, like you said, people get it twisted. I mean, as a member of the council, it's a co-equal branch of government.
It
You,
is.
you're not an intern to the mayor. You're not a subordinate to the mayor. It's a co-equal branch of government. It's that simple. And I think if your people understand that, then they're willing, they can exercise the power that is granted unto them as a co-equal branch of government and demand and request from the administration. And but if sometimes folk perhaps may not understand that or just decide to, said, well, I remember several years ago, I was talking to a council member, former council member, who basically said, well, they reached out to the mayor and the mayor did not respond and so forth. And I said, well, you're a co-equal branch of government. How can the mayor not respond to you? That don't make no sense. You don't work for the mayor. You don't report to the mayor.
Right, right. No, I mean, they're supposed to be respond,
Right,
period.
right,
You know, or you let your vote reflect it.
right. That's
One
true.
way or another. Or if it's something that's worthwhile,
Right,
notifying the community about, you do that too.
right, right,
Sometimes you have to do those things. You don't know, but you go in
right.
with good intentions. You go in, so there's going to be mutual respect.
Mhm.
Um, but people need to know respect is earned and it's both ways.
Right. Let me ask you, Councilwoman, as we begin to wind down this interview, the next city council here, your expectations in terms of there'll be new colleagues you'll be working with in January, as we see with the results of the primary race. You are the highest vote getter. In the past, before the charter was the charterman, the city charter was amended through a referendum, and prior to that, you'll be in line to become the council president as the highest vote getter, right? But that rule has now changed, right?
Yes, the last
Yeah,
Charter Revision Commission changed that.
right. Let
Remember
me
when they went to districts, the
right,
hybrid.
right. Let me ask you this though, but would you be interested in becoming the next president of the city council, absent of even that charter rule, but the fact that, I mean, you've been out here addressing this myriad of issues. And I just had a conversation about you the other day. I said, Councilwoman Waters looks like she's the only council member who's walking this summer. I've not seen any other council member out here addressing these issues. Is this something that, are you thinking about seeking the presidency of the Detroit City Council if your colleagues on the council said in January, well, let's give this to Councilwoman Waters?
Well, they're not going to say that in general.
Right, right. But I'm just, right.
uh, but that's my work ethic, though. I just work. I can't help myself. Just
I
like
see. I like how you deflected my question, but go ahead. I'm listening.
but let me say this much: for the 6 years that I served in Lansing, I did not miss a single day of work.
Wow.
I was there. So it's just how I am. I think when you ask people to elect you to office, then you ought to be willing to do that job, Bankole. You have to take it very seriously. Um, I've gone back and forth in my mind about the council presidency. I think there are several of my colleagues that might be interested in it as well. So we shall see what this new council does. I do believe that I certainly bring the leadership experience to that body, and would be very the type of person that would not be self-serving either, and that's the type of leadership that I hope my colleagues would be looking for.
And I want to address two quick things before we round up this interview. The rental ordinance that you introduced in council, which I think was very important. Can you elaborate a little bit on that in terms of its significance and where we're headed with that as we move into the general and, of course, January of next year?
Well, I am so excited about those two ordinances that I sponsored. One was the Tenants Rights Commission. We have a 9 membership body, but so that people can go directly to the Tenants Rights Commission to address their concerns. We have more renters in this city than homeowners.
Right.
We're working to try and change that, but that's the reality right now. The compliance ordinance is the ordinance that will help us to hold the landlords accountable. And we have some pretty good landlords out there too. They're
Right.
doing what they're supposed to do. But remember when little Kamaya Davis fell through a hole in the floor and drowned in water and feces,
Yep.
that 11-month-old baby girl? We don't want to see that happen again. We don't
Yeah.
want another child to have to live that way or die that way. Landlords, register your properties. First and foremost, we only have about 10 to 11% of landlords in this city with their properties registered. It's a shame. Because if you look at other cities right here in Michigan, they are 90 and 100%. All right. So we cannot tolerate that anymore. We want their properties registered. And if you're refusing to repair the elevators, if you're refusing to repair the air conditioning, guess what? We're going to say to those citizens, those residents there, you have an opportunity to place your monies in escrow until your demands are met. And that's how we're going to be supporting our residents. And I feel very, very strong about that. Too often, our senior citizens, Bankole in particular, are in those high rises. Elevators are not working, air conditioners not working. I don't know how many lives we've lost in buildings like that because of that. That's why I'm pushing to be a more individual senior citizen homes where it would be no more than three floors.
Hmm.
We're talking about their safety, their health. We've got to do that. We've got to begin to remove our aging populations from buildings that are 21 stories high.
Right.
It's too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And finally, I want to talk about homelessness and how we address the situation. I keep referencing those two kids, the Corey kids, who were found dead in a parking lot. I think it was Greektown Casino parking lot
Mhm.
during winter. And because they could not get any help, they called the city didn't call them back, and so forth. I did a series of columns in my Detroit News column um, in the paper. I went to some of these homeless shelters and talked to these young mothers. Your point about these kids getting raised the right way. I saw a lot of that talking to this litany of young mothers. And to your point, it's poverty. Some of them grew up in the Brewster Douglas projects. And,
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of stuff. And the background wasn't, they didn't turn out to be the way it should be for them, and it impacted their lives. It determined the outcome of their lives. Whether they went to a King High School and could not graduate from King High School and could not make it to college. They started having different jobs and so forth. So I did a series of columns on this, and I reflect on it that there is a lot of suffering. There's a lot of pain. I call it the pain of poverty and inequality in Detroit that escapes a lot of us because we're busy looking at things from a 6,000 feet as opposed to
Mhm.
looking at it from the bottom. There's a lot of pain, and when I interviewed those Black women for this homelessness series I did in Detroit News recently, I saw it was almost as if you're going through this wall of Black lamentations. And Councilwoman, a lot of these, women, they look like you and I. All of them look like you and I.
Yeah.
And if given the proper background, if given the appropriate resources, they would have turned out the way that you and I have turned out, and all
That's
this
right.
have turned out. And so, and I feel like that population um, has not been listened to the way it should be. And I'm curious in terms of moving forward, what this new council would do. Would we get to it so that we don't get to a point where we have another situation where three Black kids or two Black kids are found dead in a vehicle because they could not find a place to lay their head at night. And then the report says, well, they called the city of Detroit and got no help.
And Bankole, I really wish that I had known about that situation. When people call our office, Mary Waters' office, we try to help them get placed right away. We don't care if it's 7:30, 8 o'clock at night or whatever. We call up that city department where I started a dedicated call center. I don't know what number they call. If they call, it sounds like if they called at night, they call one of the other people who takes over after 5 p.m.
Right. Yeah.
You know, But I can't say for sure what time they call. And if they call during the day, they should have received some help. But I can tell you this, during this last budget cycle, I did put in $5 million for homeless initiatives. I did that. The other thing about it is that I am putting together something where we are going to do some addressing major. My office is going to work on that initiative ourselves. And so stay tuned for that.
Right.
In fact, guess who offered to help me with it? The homeless initiatives. Kim, the artist, because
Nice.
he's homeless himself.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
And I said, he walked up to me, he said, I'm going to help you. And I said, you are, I'm going to hold you to that. And so I'm looking forward to that. When we come back, we'll continue to pull things together. Of course, I never really left, frankly. But when we come back into the office right now, we're out in the community a lot. But when we come back into the office, we're getting this ready. And I suppose that, it'll be launched with the new administration,
Right.
whoever that is, so that we can address it. Because it's escalating, Bankole. It really is. Every day, there's somebody that calls my office. We place people, at least 3 or 4 people a day, just from my office. I don't know what other offices they're calling
Right.
to receive help, but that's what we're doing right here in my office. So we're not going to ignore it. We're going to turn it up so that we can help a lot more people. So we are currently putting together a plan.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Councilwoman Mary Waters, Councilwoman at Large, perhaps the only council member of the Detroit City Council who's walking this summer. That's my opinion. And I think that explains why you are the highest vote getter as well. But thank you so much for being here, and we'll be in touch.
Well, thank you so much. And Bankole, wherever I go, I'm just getting so much Detroit love. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Detroit. Thank you for your love and your support.
All right. Wonderful.
All right.